Thanks for joining us for episode 4 of the Stories of Kcymaerxthaere. And today we're going to talk about language, and in particular one language called Beshwa Nyelvate. Beshwa Nyelvate. And this language was actually very important to the way Kcymaerxthaere turned out. It was really important because it was actually kind of a connective tissue between many different kinds of organisms, many different types of cultures, even different kinds of humans. And it let there be kind of a shared language with all these creatures who are so very different. There's a group of creatures in Kcymaerxthaere called the Geographer-at-Large, even hard for me to pronounce, not a native speaker. Geographer-at-Large, and that little symbol at the end is pronounced kt. And the thing about the Geographer-at-Large, they were the conversational creatures. And they, we think of ourselves as humans as being relatively conversational, or at least able to do so when necessary. But there were other creatures that could do that. There were the rabansg. We know about dolphins in our world. But there are also creatures like the xthaedra, which were all dimensions in size and had no metabolism whatsoever, but just had incredibly witty conversations. There was the wise microbes. There are the rabansg forests, where each tree, actually, when it was covered with blossoms, each blossom sort of functioned as an independent member of the crowd, if you will, and they were very gossipy. They actually could be a little bit cruel. But what's really important about it is that it did allow for this shared communication, and it didn't start exactly that way. It started originally as Nyelvate, and it was spoken by people who were biologically aquatic. So if you think about it, they're biologically aquatic people and culturally aquatic people. So if you hold your breath and dive into the water, or you scuba dive, or you use the tunnel of a creature like the water mole to get quite far into the water, you're culturally aquatic because the water's important to you, but you're really still breathing air. Dolphins are that way. But then the biologically aquatic people live in areas where the oxygen vents are so intense that they can actually just breathe the water. Now, this posed a problem because anyone who's tried to talk underwater in a swimming pool or a lake with their friends as a kid knows that you really can't say that much. You just can kind of screech, and it doesn't really work. That's why the operas are never, there are no opera houses underwater, or built underwater at any rate, for that reason. So what these people learned to do was to psychoform, which is to use their mind to create shapes, to manifest physical shapes, physical words, and then these would appear in the water, and everybody would talk, and then those shapes would be there. And then when the conversation was over, the fish and other creatures would eat all the shapes. Very eco-friendly conversations. And this technique people started to find out about. Now, the thing about this Nyelvate, which did not make it ideal for wide use, is that oftentimes those shapes were in 12 or even more dimensions, so it was very hard to do. But then over time, people sort of started simplifying it. So this is a one of the shape words. This is a word that means reflection. Reflection. This is a word that means the feeling of being quite exposed and yet sheltered in a high wind. And that's actually the name of a quality of existence. And there are other ones as well. There's this, which means waters within waters. Here's another one that means beginning. Now you notice these shape words are not representational. This doesn't look like waters within waters. This one doesn't look like a reflection. But the thing is, they aren't letters either. And they come out in conversation in this shape form. They manifest as directly from the mind of the speaker as any of our audible words do. And one of the people say, well, what's the big deal? Hieroglyphics are shape languages, aren't they? Or you take the kanji and you see those. Isn't that basically a shape language? It's just, a little more elaborate. And the difference is that Nyelvate and Beshwa Nyelvate are essentially spoken languages, even though they're physically manifested. So everybody has a different accent in a way, or has a way of speaking, you can say. And you can see even when we see different installations of, say, waters within waters, the presentation of the shape is a little bit different. A really obvious example is you notice that those shapes were like this. You saw the outline. Well, that's very typical of a saltwater accent. And freshwater accents tend to be much more solid like this. So there are a lot of, there are nuances like that. In fact, this artist, a ceramicist named Morgana King, just did a beautiful project where she made an amphora near the site of a healing palindrome, which is a Kcymaerxthaere site. And what she did is she put some of the Nyelvate words onto the amphora. And the accent she used, her accent is very different. It's much more of the accent you associate with an aerial river. And the project that she's doing is quite beautiful because it's in unfired clay, and then it will be returned to the river during the next flood season. So we're really anxious to see that process. So here you can see she did the word jambelak, which is a word we heard earlier, which means sort of qualities of existence. And these are other places where you can see that same word, and the qualities are slightly different. So that's one of the great things. It's a spoken language, or it has the qualities of a spoken language, the nuance, the inflection, and all that. But it also is physical. And once you start to understand it, you sometimes see those shapes in a lot of different places. And we'll talk next about some of the communities that grew up around those shapes. In particular, a bird called the yaarayehyay, and that was very fond of using the shape words as nesting materials. And by the way, just to close the loop from the last episode, we showed you a picture of the installation we did in South Dakota in the linear United States. And that shape was actually the Nyelvate word for village, which is the place where the dreams of imaginary creatures come to life. See you next time. Shof Keppel Poets.